My name is Ida Mitchell, and I'm 63 years old. For the past 5 years, my husband Theodore had terrorized me in our home through intimidation, threats, and control. He thought I was terrified of him, and for a long time I was. But yesterday, something inside me changed. Theodore cornered me in our kitchen, raised his voice to that threatening level he used when he wanted me to submit, and waited for me to cower like I always did. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "I'm done being afraid of you." Theodore's face went from confident to confused to furious in seconds. "What did you just say?" Theodore demanded, his voice dangerously low. "I said I'm done," I repeated, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done walking on eggshells. I'm done letting you control my life." "You'll regret this," Theodore threatened, stepping closer. But I didn't step back. For the first time in 5 years, I held my ground. "No," I said quietly, "you're going to regret this." The next day, I showed Theodore I wasn't afraid anymore. I took action that would change both our lives forever, action that would expose his abuse, protect me legally, and ensure he could never terrorize me again. But to understand how I went from a terrified wife to a woman who stood up to her abuser, I need to take you back to the beginning. I met Theodore Mitchell in 1985 when I was 23 years old. He was 25, charming, confident, and attentive. We met at a church social, and he swept me off my feet. "You're the most beautiful woman here," Theodore told me that first night. "I'm going to marry you someday." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but Theodore was serious. 6 months later, he proposed. A year after that, we were married. For the first 20 years of our marriage, Theodore was a good husband. Not perfect. He had a temper, he liked things done his way, he could be controlling, but overall, he treated me well. We raised 2 children together, Geneva and Curtis. Theodore worked as an accountant. I worked part-time as a school secretary. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, went to church every Sunday, and looked like a normal, happy family. But things started changing about 15 years ago, when Theodore was 53 and I was 51. Around age 53, Theodore started changing. He became more irritable, more controlling, more demanding. Little things that never bothered him before suddenly became major issues. "Why is dinner not ready when I get home?" Theodore would demand, even though I'd worked all day too. "Why is the house not perfectly clean?" Theodore would criticize, ignoring the fact that I maintained our entire household. "Why are you questioning me?" Theodore would snap if I disagreed with him about anything. At first, I thought it was stress from work. Theodore's accounting firm was going through changes. Maybe the pressure was getting to him. "Theodore, are you okay?" I'd ask gently. "You seem more stressed lately." "I'm fine," Theodore would say dismissively. "Just stop nagging me." But he wasn't fine. His behavior kept getting worse. 10 years ago, when Theodore was 58, his controlling behavior intensified significantly. He started monitoring everything I did, where I went, who I talked to, how I spent money, what I wore. "Where are you going?" Theodore would demand if I tried to leave the house. "Just to the grocery store," I'd explain. "Why? We have food," Theodore would challenge. "We need milk and bread," I'd start. "I'll decide when we need groceries," Theodore would interrupt. "You stay home." He took control of all our finances. I had to ask permission to spend money on anything, even necessities. "Theodore, I need $40 for groceries," I'd request. "What for?" Theodore would demand to know every item I planned to buy. "Milk, bread, vegetables, chicken," I'd list. "That shouldn't cost $40, Theodore would argue. "Here's 20, make it work." He criticized everything I did, the way I cleaned, the way I cooked, the way I dressed. Nothing was ever good enough. "This bathroom isn't clean," Theodore would complain. "I scrubbed it this morning," I'd protest. "Well, you didn't do it right," Theodore would say. "Do it again." I started walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate Theodore's moods, trying to avoid triggering his anger. But it didn't matter. Theodore would find something to criticize regardless of what I did. 5 years ago, when Theodore was 63 and I was 61, his behavior crossed a line. He started making threats. Not physical threats, Theodore never hit me, but psychological threats. Threats designed to make me feel trapped, helpless, afraid. "If you ever leave me, I'll make sure you end up with nothing," Theodore would say coldly. "This house is in my name. Our savings are in my name. You'll be homeless and penniless." "Theodore, we've been married for 40 years, I'd protest. "If we divorce, the law says I get half." "You think any judge will give you half?" Theodore would laugh cruelly. "I'm a respected accountant. You're just a part-time secretary. Who do you think they'll believe?" "I have rights," I'd try to argue. "You have nothing," Theodore would interrupt. "You exist because I allow it. You live here because I provide for you. Without me, you're nothing." These conversations left me feeling small, worthless, terrified. Theodore also started threatening to cut me off from our children. "If you ever try to leave, I'll tell Geneva and Curtis what a terrible mother you were," Theodore would threaten. "I'll make sure they never speak to you again." "That's not true," I'd protest. "I was a good mother." "Was you?" Theodore would challenge. "Because I remember a lot of times you weren't there when they needed you, working instead of being home, too tired to help with homework, missing school events because of your job." "I worked to help support our family," I'd defend. "You worked because you were selfish," Theodore would claim. "And our children suffered. They just don't know it yet. But if you leave, I'll make sure they understand how you failed them." The threats were constant, relentless, designed to break my spirit. And they worked. For 5 years, I stayed because I was terrified of what Theodore would do if I left. Over the 5 years of escalating control and threats, Theodore systematically isolated me from everyone who could help. He didn't want me seeing my sister Letty anymore. "Why do you need to visit Letty?" Theodore would demand when I'd mention wanting to see her. "She's my sister," I'd explain. "I haven't seen her in months." "You see her at church," Theodore would dismiss. "For 5 minutes after service," I'd protest. "I want to actually spend time with her." "No," Theodore would say firmly. "Letty puts ideas in your head, makes you dissatisfied with our marriage. You're not seeing her." He didn't want me talking to our neighbor Opal either. "I saw you talking to Opal over the fence today," Theodore accused one evening. "She was just being friendly," I explained. "We talked for 5 minutes." "About what?" Theodore demanded. "Just neighborhood things. Her garden, the weather," I started. "You were complaining about me, weren't you?" Theodore interrupted. "No," I protested. "I would never." "Stay away from Opal," Theodore ordered. "I don't want you gossiping with neighbors about our private business." He even tried to control my relationship with our children. When Geneva called to chat, Theodore would monitor the conversation. "What are you telling her?" Theodore would demand after I hung up. "Just normal mother-daughter stuff," I'd explain. "She told me about work, I told her about my week." "You better not be complaining about me to our daughter," Theodore would threaten. "I'm not," I'd insist. But Theodore's constant suspicion made me self-conscious every time I talked to Geneva or Curtis. I started censoring myself, keeping conversations superficial, afraid that if I said anything Theodore didn't approve of, he'd somehow find out and punish me. By the time Theodore's behavior reached its worst, I was completely isolated. No real conversations with family, no friends allowed, no support system. Just Theodore and fear. 6 months ago, Theodore's control reached suffocating levels. He wanted to know exactly where I was every minute of every day. "Where have you been?" Theodore demanded when I came home from the grocery store. "The store," I said, confused. "You knew I was going." "You were gone for an hour and 20 minutes, Theodore said, checking his watch. "The store is 15 minutes away. That's 30 minutes driving, 30 minutes shopping maximum. Where were you for the extra 20 minutes? "There was a line at checkout," I tried to explain. "You're lying," Theodore accused. "Who were you meeting?" "No one," I protested. "Theodore, I went to the store, that's all." "Show me the receipt," Theodore demanded. I gave him the receipt, showing exactly what I'd bought and the timestamp. Theodore studied it, looking for evidence of, I don't even know what, evidence that I was lying, evidence that I'd been somewhere else. This receipt is from 12:47, Theodore said. You left here at 11:15. That's an hour and 32 minutes. Where's the missing time? I don't know, I said, exasperated. Maybe the store clock is fast. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe I walked slowly through the aisles. Theodore, why are you interrogating me about grocery shopping? Because you're hiding something, Theodore insisted. You're always hiding something. These interrogations happened daily, about everything. Where I'd been, who I'd talked to, what I'd done with every minute of my day. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. 3 months ago, Theodore's financial control became financial abuse. He cut off my access to money almost entirely. I'm canceling your credit card, Theodore announced one day. What, why? I asked, alarmed. Because you don't need it, Theodore said. If you need something, ask me. I'll decide if it's necessary and pay for it. Theodore, I need access to money, I protested. What if there's an emergency? What kind of emergency? Theodore challenged. I don't know, medical emergency, car emergency, anything. I tried to explain. If there's an emergency, you call me, Theodore said. I'll handle it. But what if I can't reach you? I asked. You can always reach me, Theodore said. And if you can't, you don't actually have an emergency, you just have bad planning. He gave me a household allowance of $100 per week. This is for groceries, gas, and any personal items you need, Theodore explained, handing me 5 $20 bills. $100 isn't enough, I protested. Groceries alone cost more than that. Then you're shopping wrong, Theodore said. Buy store brands, use coupons, plan better. What about my personal money? I asked. I work part-time at the school. That money goes into our joint account. Our account, Theodore corrected. Which I manage. Your income contributes to household expenses. You don't get separate personal money. So I have no financial independence at all? I asked, understanding dawning. You have everything you need, Theodore said. You have a house, food, clothes. What more do you want? Freedom, I said quietly. Freedom is overrated, Theodore dismissed. Dependency is security. Be grateful for what you have. 1 month ago, I did something risky. I opened a secret bank account. I'd been hiding small amounts of cash from my household allowance, $1 here, $5 there. Buying store brand instead of name brand and pocketing the difference. Returning items Theodore didn't notice and keeping the refund. Over 3 months, I'd saved $240. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it represented something Theodore couldn't control, my preparation to leave. I opened a bank account at a different bank than the one Theodore used, one where he'd never accidentally see a statement or recognize an employee. I'd like to open a checking account, I told the bank teller, a young woman named Geneva. Of course, Geneva said cheerfully. I'll need your ID, social security number, and an initial deposit. I have $240 in cash, I said nervously, glancing around as if Theodore might somehow know what I was doing. That's perfect, Geneva said. And would you like paper statements or electronic? Electronic, I said quickly. Sent to an email Theodore doesn't know about. Geneva looked at me carefully. Ma'am, is everything okay? I'm just being careful, I said evasively. Geneva didn't push, but her expression showed she understood. She'd probably seen this before, women opening secret accounts, preparing to leave controlling husbands. Your account is set up, Geneva said, handing me a debit card. Your statements will be emailed. The card doesn't have your name on it, just the account number in case that matters. Thank you, I said, tears of gratitude forming. That secret account represented hope, a way out, a small piece of independence in a life where Theodore controlled everything. 2 weeks ago, Theodore caught me on the phone with my sister Letty. I'd called her from a grocery store parking lot. Using one of the prepaid phones, I'd bought with my hidden cash. "Letty, I can't take this anymore," I was saying. "Theodore controls everything. Where I go, what I do, who I talk to, I feel like I'm suffocating." "Then leave him," Letty said firmly. "Pack a bag and come stay with me." "It's not that simple," I explained. "Theodore says if I leave, he'll make sure I get nothing. He says he'll turn our children against me." "Theodore is lying to control you," Letty interrupted. "You've been married for 40 years. You have rights. Half of everything is yours regardless of what he says." "But what if he's right?" I worried. "What if I leave and end up with nothing?" "Then you'll have nothing but your freedom," Letty said, "which is worth more than living in fear." I didn't realize Theodore had followed me to the store. Didn't realize he was sitting in his car 3 spaces away, watching. When I got home, Theodore was waiting. "Who were you talking to?" Theodore demanded. "No one," I lied instinctively. "Don't lie to me," Theodore said, his voice dangerously calm. "I saw you, on the phone, in the parking lot. Who were you talking to?" My heart pounded. "Letty." "I told you not to talk to Letty," Theodore said. "She's my sister," I protested. "She's poison," Theodore countered. "Putting ideas in your head, making you think you can leave me." "Maybe I should leave you," I said, surprising myself with the words. Theodore's expression turned cold. "You leave and I'll destroy you. I'll tell Geneva and Curtis every lie I can think of. I'll drain our accounts before you can touch them. I'll make sure you spend your last years alone and penniless. Is that what you want?" "I want to be free of you," I whispered. "You'll never be free," Theodore said. "You're mine forever." Yesterday morning, something snapped inside me. Theodore was yelling at me about breakfast. The eggs were too runny, the toast was too dark, the coffee was too weak. "Can't you do anything right?" Theodore demanded. Usually, I'd apologize. I'd offer to make new eggs, new toast, new coffee. I'd try to fix whatever was wrong. But yesterday, I was tired. Tired of apologizing. Tired of trying to please someone who could never be pleased. Tired of being afraid. "The eggs are fine," I said quietly. "What did you just say?" Theodore asked, shocked. "I said the eggs are fine," I repeated, my voice stronger. "If you don't like them, make your own." Theodore stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly. He walked over to where I stood by the stove, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "You don't talk to me that way," Theodore said, his voice low and threatening. My heart was pounding. Every instinct told me to apologize, to back down, to submit like I always did. But I didn't. "I'm done being afraid of you," I said, looking him in the eyes. Theodore's face showed confusion, then fury. "What did you just say?" "I'm done," I repeated. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done walking on eggshells. I'm done letting you control my life." "You'll regret this," Theodore threatened, stepping even closer. But I didn't step back. I held my ground. "No," I said, "you're going to regret this." Theodore stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if I was serious. I was. "We'll see about that," Theodore finally said, then turned and left for work. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and cried, not from fear, but from relief. I'd finally stood up to him, and I was done being his victim. The next day, I showed Theodore I wasn't afraid anymore. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Hit that like button and turn on NOTIFICTONS. Drop a comment. Is Ida doing the right thing? What should she do next? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia? Let me know. The morning after I told Theodore I was done being afraid, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in 5 years. Theodore had already left for work, leaving without saying goodbye, his way of punishing me for standing up to him yesterday. But his silent treatment didn't hurt me anymore. Instead, it gave me something precious, time alone to execute my plan. I'd spent all night thinking about what to do. I couldn't just leave. Theodore would find me, intimidate me, manipulate me into coming back like he'd done with psychological threats for years. I needed protection, legal protection, evidence. a plan that would ensure Theodore could never terrorize me again. So that morning, while Theodore thought I was cowering at home afraid of his anger, I took action. First, I called a lawyer. I'd found attorney Geneva Foster's information 1 month ago while researching divorce attorneys online at the public library, where Theodore couldn't track my internet history. Attorney Foster specialized in domestic abuse cases, specifically the kind where there was no physical violence but significant psychological control and financial abuse. Law offices of Geneva Foster, a receptionist answered. I need to speak with Attorney Foster about a domestic situation, I said, my voice shaking. My husband has been controlling and threatening me for 5 years. I need help. Can you come in today? The receptionist asked. Attorney Foster has an opening at 1 p.m. Yes, I said quickly. I'll be there. After hanging up, I realized I had a problem: transportation. Theodore tracked the mileage on our car. If I drove to the lawyer's office, he'd notice the extra miles and demand to know where I'd been. I called my sister Letty. Ida, Letty answered, surprise in her voice. Are you okay? I need your help, I said. Can you pick me up at 11:30 and drive me to an appointment without telling anyone? Of course, Letty said immediately. Where are we going? To a lawyer, I said. I'm leaving Theodore, but I need to do it right. Thank God, Letty breathed. I'll be there at 11:30. While waiting for Letty, I spent 3 hours gathering evidence of Theodore's financial abuse and threats. I photographed documents showing bank statements with both our names, showing Theodore had removed my access. Canceled credit cards in my name. The household budget Theodore had written out, allocating me only $100 per week. Theodore's handwritten notes calculating his assets versus marital assets, showing he was planning to hide money if I filed for divorce. I also wrote down detailed accounts of Theodore's threats. If you leave, I'll make sure you end up with nothing. I'll turn Geneva and Curtis against you. You'll be homeless and penniless. You exist because I allow it. You're nothing without me. Each threat with the date, time, and context. Finally, I gathered financial records showing my part-time income from the school, money that went into our joint account, but which Theodore controlled entirely. By the time Letty arrived, I had a folder full of evidence. Attorney Geneva Foster was a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Mitchell, tell me what's happening, Attorney Foster said after I sat down in her office. I told her everything: Theodore's escalating control over 5 years, the isolation from family and friends, the financial abuse, the constant threats, the fear. And yesterday, I concluded, I told him I was done being afraid. He threatened me again, but I didn't back down. Now I need to make sure he can't hurt me. Mrs. Mitchell, what your husband has done is called coercive control, Attorney Foster explained. It's a pattern of behavior designed to make you feel trapped, dependent, and afraid. In many states, it's considered domestic abuse even without physical violence. Can I get a protective order? I asked. Potentially, Attorney Foster said, but it's harder without physical violence or direct threats of violence. What we can definitely do is file for divorce with specific requests that will protect you. What kind of requests? I asked. First, an emergency motion freezing all marital assets, Attorney Foster explained. That prevents Theodore from draining accounts or hiding money before the divorce is finalized. Second, a motion for temporary spousal support, Attorney Foster continued. Based on your 40-year marriage and Theodore's control of finances, you're entitled to support while the divorce proceeds. Third, exclusive use of the marital home, Attorney Foster said. We can ask the court to order Theodore to move out and allow you to stay in the house. He'll be furious, I said nervously. He will, Attorney Foster agreed. Which is why we're also going to request a civil restraining order based on his pattern of coercive control and threats. It won't be as strong as a protective order, but it will legally require Theodore to stay away from you and prohibit him from threatening or harassing you. How quickly can we do this? I asked. I can file the divorce papers and emergency motions today, Attorney Foster said. The hearing will likely be in 3 to 5 days. Theodore will be served with papers probably tomorrow. Are you prepared for his reaction? I need to be somewhere safe when he's served, I said. Do you have somewhere to go? Attorney Foster asked. My sister's house, I said. Then I suggest you pack essentials and leave tonight, Attorney Foster advised. Once Theodore is served tomorrow, he'll realize he's lost control. Men like Theodore often escalate when they realize their victim is leaving. You need to be gone before that happens. Attorney Foster and I spent the next 2 hours creating a comprehensive plan. Step 1. Documentation. Attorney Foster made copies of all my evidence. Photos of financial documents, written accounts of threats, records of my income that Theodore controlled. Step 2. Filing. Attorney Foster would file divorce papers that afternoon, along with emergency motion to freeze assets, motion for temporary spousal support, motion for exclusive use of marital home, request for civil restraining order. Step 3. Service. A process server would serve Theodore at his office tomorrow morning. Step 4. My safety. I would pack essentials tonight and leave for Letty's house before Theodore got home from work. Step 5. The hearing in 3 to 5 days. We'd appear before a judge who would rule on the emergency motions. Mrs. Mitchell, Theodore is going to be shocked when he's served tomorrow, Attorney Foster warned. He's used to controlling you. This will feel like a direct challenge to that control. He'll likely try to contact you, threaten you, manipulate you into dropping the case. I won't drop it, I said firmly. Good, Attorney Foster said, because women who return to controlling partners after leaving often face even worse abuse. You're doing the right thing, but you need to stay strong. I will, I promised. As I left Attorney Foster's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Letty drove me home at 3 p.m. We had 2 hours before Theodore typically got home from work. Pack quickly, Letty advised. Only essentials. You can get everything else later. I packed 1 week's worth of clothes. Important documents, birth certificate, social security card, marriage certificate, my secret bank account information. Medications. Sentimental items, photos of my children, my mother's jewelry. My laptop. The evidence folder. Everything fit in 2 suitcases and a large purse. Is there anything else you need from the house? Letty asked. I looked around the home I'd lived in for 35 years. The home where I'd raised my children. The home that had become a prison over the past 5 years. No, I said. Everything important is coming with me. We loaded my suitcases into Letty's car and drove away. As we pulled out of the driveway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was free. At least physically free. The legal battle was just beginning. I spent my first night of freedom at Letty's house, in her guest bedroom. How are you feeling? Letty asked as we sat in her living room drinking tea. Terrified, I admitted. Theodore doesn't know I've left yet. When he gets home and sees I'm gone, when he's served with papers tomorrow, he's going to be so angry. Let him be angry, Letty said firmly. You're safe here. He doesn't know where you are, and the law is on your side. What if he finds me? I worried. We'll deal with that if it happens, Letty said. But Ida, you did something incredibly brave today. You stood up to a man who's controlled you for 5 years. You hired a lawyer. You gathered evidence. You left. That takes courage most people can't imagine. I was so scared, I confessed. I'm still scared. Scared is normal, Letty said. But you're doing it anyway. That's real courage. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining Theodore coming home, finding me gone, calling my phone, which I'd turned off, growing increasingly furious. But I also felt something else, relief. For the first time in 5 years, I went to sleep without walking on eggshells, without worrying about Theodore's mood, without being afraid. The next morning at 9 a.m., while I was eating breakfast at Letty's house, my phone rang. I turned it back on to check messages, and immediately saw 23 missed calls from Theodore from last night. Now he was calling again. Should I answer? I asked Letty. No, Letty said firmly. Let him leave a voicemail. We need documentation of anything he says. I let the call go to voicemail. Theodore left a message. Ida, where are you? I came home last night and you were gone. Your clothes are gone. Call me immediately. This is ridiculous. Whatever you think you're doing, stop it right now and come home. Call me. His tone was controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. 10 minutes later, he called again. This voicemail was different. Ida, I know you're at Letty's. I drove by her house. I saw your car in the driveway. Wait, that's not your car. Where the hell are you? Call me right now. This is not acceptable. You're my wife. You don't just leave without telling me. Call me or I'm calling the police to report you missing. The threats were starting. At 10 a.m., Attorney Foster called me. Mrs. Mitchell, Theodore has been served, Attorney Foster reported. The process server went to his office this morning and delivered the divorce papers and emergency motions. How did he react? I asked nervously. According to the process server, Theodore turned very pale, read the first page, then said, "This is a mistake. My wife wouldn't file for divorce." The server confirmed the papers were legitimate and left. What happens now? I asked. Theodore has 48 hours to respond to the emergency motions, Attorney Foster explained. The hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Between now and then, expect Theodore to try to contact you repeatedly. He'll call, text, maybe show up places you frequent. He'll try to convince you to drop the case. I won't, I said. I know, Attorney Foster said, but be prepared. Men like Theodore don't give up control easily. She was right. Over the next 24 hours, Theodore called me 47 times. He left increasingly desperate voicemails. Ida, this is insane. Whatever Letty told you, it's wrong. I'm not controlling. I'm protecting you. Please call me. Ida, you're making a huge mistake. If you go through with this divorce, you'll regret it. I'm trying to be patient, but you're testing me. Ida, I'm at Letty's house. She won't let me talk to you. Tell her to let me in. We need to discuss this like adults. Ida, this is your last chance. Drop this divorce or I'll make sure you get nothing. Nothing. Do you understand? You'll be 70 years old living in poverty because you were too stupid to appreciate what you had. The messages went from pleading to angry to threatening within 12 hours. Attorney Foster advised me to save all the messages as evidence. These voicemails show exactly the kind of controlling, threatening behavior we're arguing in court, Attorney Foster said. Keep documenting everything. On Wednesday evening, the night before our court hearing, Theodore showed up at Letty's house. Letty and I were eating dinner when we heard pounding on the front door. Letty, I know Ida is in there, Theodore shouted. Let me talk to my wife. Letty walked to the door but didn't open it. Theodore, you need to leave. I need to talk to Ida, Theodore insisted. She doesn't want to talk to you, Letty said firmly. She's my wife, Theodore roared. I have a right to talk to her. Actually, you don't, Letty said. Especially since she's filed for divorce and a restraining order. Leave now or I'm calling the police. You turned her against me, Theodore accused. This is your fault. Ida would never leave on her own. You poisoned her mind. Theodore, leave now, Letty repeated. I'm calling the police. Let me see her, Theodore demanded. Just for 5 minutes. I can fix this if she'll just talk to me. No, Letty said. I heard Theodore kick the door in frustration. This isn't over. Ida, if you're listening, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. I'll see you in court tomorrow, and you're going to regret this. He left, tires squealing as he drove away. Letty called Attorney Foster and reported the incident. Attorney Foster said it would help our case. Theodore just proved our argument that he's controlling and threatening, Attorney Foster said. That incident will be in our motion tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow morning, I'd face Theodore in court for the first time since leaving. What if the judge doesn't believe me? I worried to Letty. You have evidence, Letty reminded me. Documents, recordings, witness testimony. The judge will believe you. What if Theodore finds a way to keep control? I feared. He won't, Letty said firmly. Tomorrow, the law takes control away from Theodore and gives it to you. That's what the emergency motions are for. I'm scared, I admitted. I know, Letty said, but you're also brave, and tomorrow you're going to show Theodore that you're not his victim anymore. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Did Ida do the right thing? What should the judge rule? Where are you watching from? Thursday morning at 8 a.m., I sat in Attorney Geneva Foster's office preparing to face Theodore in court for the first time since I'd left. Remember, stay calm no matter what Theodore says or does, Attorney Foster coached me. He's going to try to intimidate you with his presence. Don't let him. What if I freeze up? I worried. What if I see him and get scared again? Then look at me, Attorney Foster said. Or look at the judge. But Ida, you need to remember something. Theodore only has power over you if you give it to him. You took that power back when you left. Don't give it back now. At 8:30, Letty, Attorney Foster, and I walked into the courthouse. And there, standing in the hallway outside the courtroom, was Theodore. Theodore looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled. His suit was wrinkled. He had dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, his face went through several emotions: relief, anger, desperation, fury. He started walking toward me. Mr. Mitchell, stop right there, Attorney Foster said firmly, stepping between us. You're not to approach my client. I need to talk to my wife, Theodore said, his voice shaking with emotion. Your wife has made it clear she doesn't want to speak with you, Attorney Foster said. If you approach her, I'll report it to the judge. Ida, please, Theodore said, looking past Attorney Foster to me. Just 5 minutes. We can fix this. You don't have to go through with this. I wanted to look away. Every instinct from 5 years of conditioning told me to avoid his eyes, to submit, to give in. But I didn't. I looked Theodore directly in the eyes and said quietly but firmly, There's nothing to fix. I'm done. Theodore's face crumpled. You don't mean that. You're just listening to Letty and this lawyer. They're putting ideas in your head. The only person who put ideas in my head was you, I interrupted. When you told me I was nothing without you, when you told me I'd end up homeless and penniless, when you threatened to turn our children against me, those were your ideas, Theodore, and I'm done believing them. Ida, Theodore started. That's enough, Mr. Mitchell, Attorney Foster said. We'll see you in the courtroom. She guided me away, Letty beside me providing support. You did great, Letty whispered. You didn't back down. I'm shaking, I admitted. That's okay, Letty said. You faced him, that's what matters. At 9 a.m., we entered courtroom 4B. Judge Curtis Washington presided, a man in his early 60s with a reputation for being fair but firm in domestic cases. The matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, the bailiff announced. Emergency motions hearing. Theodore sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, Attorney Opal Brooks, whom he'd hired after being served. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Attorney Foster. Judge Washington reviewed the case file. We're here on emergency motions filed by the plaintiff, Mrs. Ida Mitchell, requesting 1. A freeze on all marital assets, 2. Temporary spousal support, 3. Exclusive use of the marital home, and 4. A civil restraining order. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Attorney Foster confirmed. Your Honor, these motions are extreme and unnecessary, Attorney Opal Brooks objected immediately. Mrs. Mitchell left the marital home voluntarily. There's been no physical violence, no direct threats. This is simply a wife who's upset with her husband and wants to punish him financially. Your Honor, that's absolutely false, Attorney Foster countered. Mrs. Mitchell left because she was subjected to 5 years of coercive control, financial abuse, isolation, and psychological threats. She has extensive documentation supporting all her claims. We'll hear evidence on each motion, Judge Washington said. Attorney Foster, begin with your motion to freeze assets. Attorney Foster stood. Your Honor, the defendant, Mr. Theodore Mitchell, has controlled all marital finances for the past 5 years. He removed Mrs. Mitchell's name from bank accounts, canceled her credit cards, and gave her only a $100 weekly allowance despite her contributing income to the marriage. Your Honor, I managed our finances responsibly, Theodore interrupted. Mr. Mitchell, you'll have your turn to speak, Judge Washington said sternly. Continue, Attorney Foster. More concerning, Attorney Foster continued, is evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been planning to hide assets in the event of divorce. She presented Theodore's handwritten notes, the ones I'd photographed, showing his calculations separating his assets from marital assets. These notes, written in Mr. Mitchell's handwriting, show he's been strategizing how to prevent Mrs. Mitchell from receiving her fair share of marital assets, Attorney Foster explained. Without a freeze, we believe Mr. Mitchell will drain accounts, transfer assets, or otherwise hide marital property. Your Honor, those notes were just theoretical exercises, Attorney Brooks argued. Mr. Mitchell was simply planning for retirement, not for divorce. Planning for retirement by separating his assets from marital assets, Attorney Foster challenged. That's not retirement planning, that's divorce preparation. Judge Washington studied the documents carefully. Mr. Mitchell, did you write these notes? Yes, Your Honor, Theodore admitted, but they were just theoretical, Judge Washington interrupted. Mr. Mitchell, these notes explicitly state if Ida files for divorce followed by asset protection strategies. That's not theoretical, that's planning. Theodore had no response. Motion to freeze marital assets is granted, Judge Washington ruled. Effective immediately, neither party may transfer, sell, or otherwise dispose of any marital assets without court approval. Mr. Mitchell, that includes bank accounts, retirement accounts, the marital home, vehicles, and any other significant assets. Theodore's face went red. He'd lost control of the finances. Next motion, Judge Washington said. Temporary spousal support. Attorney Foster presented evidence of our 40-year marriage, Theodore's income as an accountant, my part-time work as a school secretary, and Theodore's complete control of finances. Mrs. Mitchell contributed her income to the marriage, but was given no financial independence, Attorney Foster argued. She left the marriage with only $240 she'd managed to save secretly. She needs support immediately to meet basic living expenses while this divorce proceeds. Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell chose to leave, Attorney Brooks countered. She has family she can stay with. She has a part-time job. She can support herself. Mrs. Mitchell earns approximately $900 per month part-time, Attorney Foster said. That's barely enough for rent, let alone food, transportation, medical expenses. Mr. Mitchell earns over $8,000 per month. Temporary support is both fair and necessary. Your Honor, if I'm ordered to pay spousal support plus maintain the house and my own living expenses, I can't afford it, Theodore protested. Mr. Mitchell, you controlled all finances during the marriage, Judge Washington noted. You gave your wife of 40 years only $100 per week. You can afford temporary support. How much is Attorney Foster requesting? Judge Washington asked. $2,000 per month, Attorney Foster said. That's a quarter of my income, Theodore protested. It's less than Mrs. Mitchell is entitled to, Attorney Foster countered. Given the length of the marriage and the disparity in income, Mrs. Mitchell would likely be awarded permanent spousal support of 40 to 50% of Mr. Mitchell's income in the final divorce decree. Judge Washington considered. Temporary spousal support is granted. Mr. Mitchell, you'll pay Mrs. Mitchell $2,000 per month, payable on the first of each month, beginning December 1st. That's 10 days from now. Theodore looked devastated. He was losing financial control, piece by piece. Third motion, Judge Washington said. Exclusive use of the marital home. Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell should be able to return to the home she's lived in for 35 years without fear, Attorney Foster argued. Mr. Mitchell's presence in the home would be intimidating and would prevent Mrs. Mitchell from feeling safe. Your Honor, that's my home too, Theodore protested. I've lived there for 35 years just like she has. Why should I be the one forced out? Because you're the one who created the hostile environment, Attorney Foster said bluntly. Your Honor, we have evidence of Mr. Mitchell's controlling behavior, threats, and intimidation. She presented the written documentation I'd made of Theodore's threats, along with the recordings of his recent voicemails. Judge Washington listened to several voicemails, his expression growing more disapproving with each one. Mr. Mitchell, in these voicemails, you threaten to make sure your wife gets nothing, that she'll live in poverty, and that she's making the biggest mistake of her life, Judge Washington said. Those are threats. I was upset, Theodore defended. My wife left me. I had a right to be angry. You have a right to feel angry, Judge Washington corrected. You don't have a right to threaten your wife. Your Honor, those weren't real threats, Theodore insisted. I was just venting. Mr. Mitchell, you don't seem to understand the seriousness of your behavior, Judge Washington interrupted. For 5 years, according to these documents, you controlled every aspect of your wife's life, her finances, her social contacts, her daily activities. You threatened her with poverty and homelessness if she left. That's not a marriage, that's captivity. I was protecting her, Theodore protested. From what? Judge Washington challenged. From having her own bank account, from talking to her sister, from spending money on groceries without your permission. Theodore had no answer. Exclusive use of the marital home is granted, Judge Washington ruled. Mrs. Mitchell may return to the home. Mr. Mitchell, you have 7 days to remove your personal belongings and vacate. Until the divorce is finalized, you may not enter the property without Mrs. Mitchell's explicit permission. Where am I supposed to live? Theodore demanded. That's your problem, Mr. Mitchell, Judge Washington said coldly. Perhaps you should have considered that before you made your wife feel unsafe in her own home. Final motion, Judge Washington said. Civil restraining order. Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell needs legal protection from Mr. Mitchell's continued harassment and intimidation, Attorney Foster argued. Since she left 5 days ago, Mr. Mitchell has called her 94 times, left threatening voicemails, showed up at her sister's house and pounded on the door, and attempted to confront her in the courthouse hallway this morning. Your Honor, I was trying to talk to my wife, Theodore protested. We've been married 40 years. Don't I have a right to try to save my marriage? Not through harassment and intimidation, Judge Washington said. Mr. Mitchell, your wife filed for divorce. She doesn't want contact with you. You need to respect that. How can I save my marriage if I can't talk to her? Theodore demanded. You can't save your marriage, Judge Washington said bluntly. Your wife is divorcing you. What you're trying to do is intimidate her into dropping the divorce. That's not acceptable. I'm not trying to intimidate anyone, Theodore shouted. Mr. Mitchell, control yourself, Judge Washington warned. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Attorney Foster presented evidence of Theodore's 94 phone calls, the threatening voicemails, the incident at Letty's house, and his attempt to approach me in the courthouse. Your Honor, this is a clear pattern of harassment, Attorney Foster argued. Mrs. Mitchell needs a restraining order to ensure her safety and peace. Granted, Judge Washington ruled. Mr. Mitchell, you're hereby restrained from contacting Mrs. Mitchell directly or indirectly. No phone calls, texts, emails, letters, or third-party contact. You may not go within 500 feet of Mrs. Mitchell or any location where she's staying. All communication regarding the divorce must go through attorneys. This order is effective immediately and remains in place until the divorce is finalized. Violation will result in arrest. Do you understand? Your Honor, please, Theodore started. Do you understand? Judge Washington repeated firmly. Yes, Theodore said quietly, defeated. This hearing is concluded, Judge Washington said. All motions are granted as outlined. We'll schedule the final divorce hearing for 3 months from now. Attorneys will receive notice. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. I'd won every single motion. Theodore had lost all control. As we left the courtroom, Theodore tried one more time to approach me. Ida, please, he started. Mr. Mitchell, you're under a restraining order, Attorney Foster reminded him sharply. Get within 500 feet of my client and you'll be arrested. I just want to talk, Theodore pleaded. Then you'll be talking from jail, a bailiff said, stepping between us. Sir, step away. Theodore stood there, looking lost and broken, as the bailiff escorted us past him and out of the courthouse. In the parking lot, I broke down crying. Are you okay? Letty asked, hugging me. I'm relieved, I said through tears. I was so afraid the judge wouldn't believe me. I was so afraid Theodore would find a way to keep control. But he lost. We won. You won, Attorney Foster corrected. Ida, you stood up to your husband. You documented his abuse. You left. You fought in court. This victory is yours. What happens now? I asked. Now you go home, Attorney Foster said. Theodore has 7 days to move out. After that, the house is yours. You'll receive spousal support starting December 1st, and Theodore can't contact you or come near you without being arrested. I'm really free, I asked, hardly believing it. You're really free, Attorney Foster confirmed. 7 days after the hearing, I returned to my house for the first time since leaving. Theodore had moved out, leaving the house empty of his presence but full of memories. 40 years of marriage, both good and bad. I walked through each room, reclaiming my space, feeling the weight of fear lift more with each step. In the bedroom, Theodore had left a note on the bed. Ida, I don't understand why you're doing this. I gave you everything. I protected you. I provided for you. And this is how you repay me, by destroying our marriage, by taking our home, by turning everyone against me. I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it. You've ruined everything. The note was classic Theodore, blaming me, painting himself as the victim, refusing to take responsibility for his controlling behavior. I read it once, then tore it up and threw it away. Theodore's words didn't have power over me anymore. 2 days after I returned home, my daughter Geneva called. Mom, Dad called me, Geneva said, her voice troubled. He told me you filed for divorce. He says you're making a huge mistake. My heart sank. Theodore was trying to manipulate our children, just like he'd threatened. Geneva, what did he tell you? I asked carefully. He said you left him over nothing, Geneva reported. That you're listening to Aunt Letty who poisoned your mind against him. That he was a good husband and you're throwing away 40 years of marriage because you're being selfish. Do you believe him? I asked. There was a long pause. Mom, I don't know what to believe. You and Dad were married for 40 years. You seemed happy. I don't understand what happened. Geneva, can I tell you the truth? I asked. The whole truth about the last 5 years. Yes, Geneva said. I told her everything. Theodore's escalating control, the financial abuse, the isolation, the threats, the fear. Mom, why didn't you tell me this was happening? Geneva asked, her voice breaking. Because your father controlled who I talked to and what I said, I explained. And because I was ashamed. I thought if I was a better wife, he wouldn't treat me this way. Mom, none of that was your fault, Geneva said firmly. Dad was abusing you. Oh my God, Mom, I had no idea. I hid it well, I admitted. Curtis needs to know, Geneva said. Can I tell him? Yes, I said. Your father is probably calling him too, telling his version. Curtis should know the truth. Mom, I'm so sorry, Geneva said. I'm sorry you went through that alone. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm proud of you for leaving. Those words, proud of you, meant more than Geneva could know. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Smash that like button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Was the judge's ruling fair? Should I have left sooner? Where are you watching from? 3 months after I stood up to Theodore in our kitchen and told him I was done being afraid, I sat in the same courtroom where the emergency motions had been granted, waiting for the final divorce hearing. Theodore sat at the defendant's table with attorney Opal Brooks, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of control he'd wielded over me for 5 years. I sat at the plaintiff's table with attorney Geneva Foster, feeling stronger than I'd felt in years. The past 3 months had been transformative. Living alone in my house, the house Theodore had been ordered to vacate, receiving spousal support that gave me financial independence, being protected by a restraining order that meant Theodore couldn't threaten or intimidate me. For 3 months, I'd been free, and now the divorce would make that freedom permanent. Judge Curtis Washington entered the courtroom. The matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, the bailiff announced. Final divorce hearing. We're here to finalize the dissolution of a 40-year marriage, Judge Washington began. The court has reviewed all submitted documents, financial disclosures, and proposed settlement agreements. Are both parties ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Attorney Foster confirmed. Yes, Your Honor, Attorney Brooks confirmed. Before we begin, I want to address Mr. Mitchell directly, Judge Washington said, looking at Theodore. Mr. Mitchell, have you complied with the restraining order issued 3 months ago? Yes, Your Honor, Theodore said quietly. Have you had any contact, direct or indirect, with Mrs. Mitchell? Judge Washington pressed. Theodore hesitated. I sent a letter to our daughter, Geneva, asking her to tell her mother I wanted to talk. That's indirect contact, Mr. Mitchell, Judge Washington said sternly. That's a violation of the restraining order. Your Honor, I didn't know, Theodore started. The order explicitly states no direct or indirect contact, Judge Washington interrupted. Asking your daughter to pass a message is indirect contact. Mr. Mitchell, you're fortunate Mrs. Mitchell didn't report this violation, or you'd be sitting in jail right now instead of this courtroom. "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Theodore said, looking genuinely chastened. "Moving forward," Judge Washington said, "let's address the division of assets and finalization of this divorce." Attorney Foster presented the proposed asset division. After 40 years of marriage, Theodore and I had accumulated the marital home, valued at $425,000. Retirement accounts in Theodore's name, $380,000. Joint savings, $85,000. 2 vehicles, $35,000 combined value. Household furnishings and personal property, approximately $40,000. Total marital assets, approximately $965,000. "Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell is requesting the following division," Attorney Foster said. "The marital home to Mrs. Mitchell, half of Mr. Mitchell's retirement accounts, transferred to a retirement account in Mrs. Mitchell's name, that's $190,000. Half of the joint savings, $42,500, 1 vehicle, and half the value of household furnishings." "That's a standard 50-50 split," Attorney Foster continued. "However, we're also requesting a compensatory payment of $50,000 to Mrs. Mitchell for the financial abuse she suffered during the marriage." "Financial abuse?" Attorney Brooks objected. "Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell managed their finances. That's not abuse." "Mr. Mitchell canceled his wife's credit cards, removed her from bank accounts, and gave her only $100 per week despite her contributing income to the marriage," Attorney Foster countered. "That's textbook financial abuse. The compensatory payment is both warranted and minimal." Judge Washington reviewed the financial documents. "Mr. Mitchell, you earned significantly more than your wife during the marriage, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Theodore admitted. "And you controlled all marital finances," Judge Washington continued. "I managed our finances, yes," Theodore said. "You didn't manage them, you controlled them," Judge Washington corrected. "There's a difference. Managing finances means both spouses have access and input. Controlling finances means one spouse has all the power. You had all the power, Mr. Mitchell." "I was protecting our assets," Theodore defended. "From whom?" Judge Washington challenged. "From your wife of 40 years. Mr. Mitchell, the evidence is clear. You used financial control as a tool of psychological abuse." Theodore had no response. "Asset division is approved as proposed," Judge Washington ruled. "Mrs. Mitchell receives the marital home, half the retirement accounts, half the savings, 1 vehicle, and half the household property. Additionally, Mr. Mitchell will pay Mrs. Mitchell $50,000 as compensation for financial abuse. This payment is due within 60 days. Theodore's face showed defeat. He'd lost not just half the assets, but an additional $50,000. "Next, permanent spousal support," Judge Washington said. "Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell is requesting permanent spousal support of $2,500 per month," Attorney Foster said. "This represents approximately 30% of Mr. Mitchell's monthly income. Given the length of the marriage, the income disparity, and Mrs. Mitchell's age, she's 63 and has limited earning potential. Permanent support is appropriate." "Your Honor, that's excessive," Attorney Brooks objected. "Mr. Mitchell is already paying temporary support of $2,000 per month. Increasing it to $2,500 will be a significant burden." "Mr. Mitchell earns over $8,000 per month," Attorney Foster countered. "After spousal support of $2,500, he'll still have $5,500 for his own expenses. That's more than enough to live comfortably." "What about when Mr. Mitchell retires?" Attorney Brooks asked. "His income will decrease." "Then he can petition for a modification of support," Attorney Foster said. "But until he retires, Mrs. Mitchell is entitled to adequate support." Judge Washington considered. Given the 40-year marriage and the evidence of financial control during that marriage, permanent spousal support of $2,500 per month is granted. This support continues until Mrs. Mitchell's death, remarriage, or cohabitation with a romantic partner, or until Mr. Mitchell retires, at which point he may petition for modification. Theodore closed his eyes in resignation. "Finally, the restraining order," Judge Washington said. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you wish to keep the restraining order in place after the divorce is finalized?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I don't trust that Theodore won't try to intimidate or control me even after the divorce." "Your Honor, the restraining order was only necessary during the divorce proceedings," Attorney Brooks argued. "Now that the divorce will be final, there's no reason for it to continue." "Except that Mr. Mitchell has already violated it once by sending an indirect message through his daughter," Attorney Foster pointed out. "That shows he doesn't respect legal boundaries." "Mr. Mitchell, if the restraining order is lifted, will you respect your ex-wife's desire for no contact?" Judge Washington asked. Theodore hesitated. "Your Honor, I just want the chance to apologize, to explain, to maybe salvage some kind of relationship." "Mr. Mitchell, your wife doesn't want a relationship with you." Judge Washington interrupted. "She's made that abundantly clear. The question is whether you can accept that." I don't know," Theodore admitted. "We were married for 40 years. I can't just pretend she doesn't exist." "You don't have to pretend she doesn't exist," Judge Washington said. "But you do have to leave her alone. Can you do that?" Theodore didn't answer. "The restraining order remains in place," Judge Washington ruled. "Mr. Mitchell, you are permanently prohibited from contacting Mrs. Mitchell directly or indirectly. You may not go within 500 feet of her or her residence. This order is permanent and enforceable. Violation will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Theodore said quietly. "The court finds that the marriage of Theodore and Ida Mitchell is irretrievably broken," Judge Washington announced. "The marriage is hereby dissolved. Assets will be divided as ordered. Mr. Mitchell will pay spousal support of $2,500 per month beginning next month. The permanent restraining order remains in effect. This divorce is final as of today." Judge Washington looked at both of us. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, your 40-year marriage is over. Mr. Mitchell, I hope you use this as an opportunity to reflect on your behavior and make changes. Mrs. Mitchell, I hope you find peace and freedom in this new chapter of your life." The gavel came down. After 40 years of marriage, 5 of them marked by increasing control and fear, I was divorced. Free, independent. After the hearing, as we left the courtroom, Theodore tried one final time to speak to me, carefully staying more than 500 feet away but calling out. "Ida, I'm sorry for everything. Can we please just talk?" I stopped and turned to face him from the safe distance. "Theodore, we have nothing to talk about," I said calmly. "You had 40 years to treat me with respect. You chose control instead. You had 5 years to recognize your behavior was abusive. You chose to blame me instead. Now it's over. I'm free, and I'm never giving you power over me again." "Please," Theodore begged. "I can change. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want." "I don't want anything from you," I said, "except for you to leave me alone." I turned and walked away with Attorney Foster and Letty beside me. "How do you feel?" Letty asked. "Free," I said simply. "For the first time in 5 years, completely free." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sat on the porch of my house, legally and completely mine, reflecting on how my life had changed. I'd reconnected with friends I'd lost contact with during Theodore's years of control. I'd joined a book club. I'd started volunteering at the library. I'd taken up painting, something I'd loved as a young woman but had stopped doing when Theodore criticized my wasting time on hobbies. Every month, $2,500 appeared in my bank account, the spousal support that gave me financial security and independence. My children, Geneva and Curtis, had both been shocked and angry when they learned the full truth about Theodore's behavior. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" Curtis had asked after Geneva filled him in. "Because I was ashamed," I'd explained. "And because your father controlled so much of my life that I was afraid he'd follow through on his threats to turn you against me." "We would never have turned against you," Geneva said firmly. "Dad lied, he manipulated, he controlled. None of that was your fault." Both children had confronted Theodore about his behavior. Theodore had tried to defend himself, to minimize what he'd done, to blame me. Geneva had been blunt. "Dad, you financially abused Mom for 5 years. You isolated her. You threatened her. That's not management or protection, that's abuse. Until you acknowledge that and get help, I don't want a relationship with you." Curtis had been equally firm. "Dad, I love you, but what you did to Mom was wrong. You need therapy, you need to change, and you need to leave Mom alone." Theodore had been devastated by our children's rejection. He tried to reach out to me multiple times through mutual acquaintances, always with the same message. "I want to apologize. I want to make amends. Please talk to me." But I'd held firm. I had nothing to say to Theodore. He'd had 40 years to be a good husband. He'd chosen control instead. Now he had to live with the consequences. 8 months after the divorce, I did something that changed my perspective. I joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. "But Theodore never hit me," I'd said to the group facilitator when she'd invited me. "Is that still domestic abuse?" "Abuse isn't just physical," the facilitator, Opal Reed, had explained. "Financial abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, coercive control, these are all forms of domestic violence. You absolutely belong in this group." At my first meeting, I met 6 other women who'd experienced similar patterns of control in their marriages. One woman, Letty Stone, was 72. Her husband had controlled her for 25 years before she finally left at age 70. "I wasted 25 years being afraid," Letty said during the meeting. "Don't waste any more of yours." Another woman, Geneva Turner, was only 43. She'd been married for 15 years to a man who controlled her finances, monitored her phone, and isolated her from family. "I left 3 years ago," Geneva shared. "Best decision of my life. It's hard starting over, but it's better than living in fear." Hearing these women's stories made me realize something important. I wasn't alone. What Theodore did to me, he'd done because of his need for control, not because of any failure on my part. I spent years thinking if I was a better wife, Theodore wouldn't control me, I shared with the group. But now I understand, nothing I did would have changed his behavior. The problem was never me. It was always him. The women in the group understood in a way no one else could. They'd lived it, they'd survived it, and they were thriving now. 1 year after I told Theodore I was done being afraid, I celebrated my 64th birthday, surrounded by family and friends in the house that was now solely mine. Geneva and Curtis were there with their families. Letty was there. Friends from my book club, women from my support group. It was a celebration not just of my birthday, but of my freedom, my survival, my new life. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," Geneva said during a quiet moment on the porch. "What you did took incredible courage." "I should have done it sooner," I admitted. "Maybe," Geneva agreed. "But you did it when you were ready, that's what matters." "Do you ever hear from your father?" I asked carefully. "He calls occasionally," Geneva said. "He's in therapy now, claims he's working on understanding his controlling behavior. I hope it's true. But Mom, even if Dad changes completely, that doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with him." "I don't want one," I said firmly. "I'm happy with my life as it is. I don't need Theodore in it for closure, for apology, for anything." "Good," Geneva said. "You deserve peace." And I had peace, complete, genuine peace. I'm 64 years old now. Theodore is 66, living in a small apartment across town, paying me $2,500 per month in spousal support, legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me. 1 year ago, my husband thought I was terrified of him, and I was. For 5 years, Theodore terrorized me through control, threats, and psychological abuse. He made me believe I was nothing without him, that I'd end up homeless and penniless if I left, that I had no power, no options, no hope. But one day, something inside me broke, or maybe something healed. When Theodore raised his voice to intimidate me like he'd done hundreds of times before, I didn't cower. I didn't apologize. I didn't submit. I looked him in the eyes and said, I'm done being afraid of you. The next day I showed him I meant it. I hired a lawyer. I gathered evidence. I filed for divorce. I left. And I won. I won exclusive use of our home. I won spousal support. I won half our assets plus $50,000 compensation for financial abuse. I won a permanent restraining order. But more than that, I won my freedom. Theodore had spent 5 years making me believe I was powerless, but I wasn't powerless. I had rights. I had options. I had strength I didn't know I possessed. All I had to do was find my voice and use it. 1 year ago, I was a woman living in fear in her own home, controlled by a husband who'd systematically stripped away her independence, her confidence, her sense of self. Now I'm a divorced woman living independently in my own home, financially secure, legally protected, surrounded by people who love and support me. Theodore thought he could keep me trapped through fear and control. He thought I'd never have the courage to leave. He thought I'd always be too afraid to stand up to him. He was wrong. My husband thought I was terrified of him. The next day, I showed him I was finished being afraid. And that made all the difference. I learned something crucial through this nightmare. Fear only has power if you let it. Control only works if you submit to it. Threats only succeed if you believe them. The moment I stopped believing Theodore's threats, stopped submitting to his control, stopped letting fear dictate my choices, that was the moment I took my power back. Theodore tried to make me believe I was nothing without him. Instead, I proved I was everything without him. At 64, I'm starting a new chapter of my life. A chapter written by me, for me, with no one controlling the narrative but myself. Theodore spent 5 years making me afraid to speak up, afraid to leave, afraid to live. I spent one day showing him I was done being afraid. And I spent the past year proving it. That's how this story ends, with a woman who found her voice after years of silence, who chose freedom after years of control, who discovered strength after years of fear. My husband thought I was terrified of him. He was right. For 5 years I was. But then I showed him I was finished being afraid. And I've never been more free in my life. Fear tried to control me. Theodore tried to control me. But in the end, the only person who controls my life is me. And that's exactly how it should be. 1 year after standing up to Theodore, Ida is completely free. Final divorce hearing. Judge Washington granted Ida the house, $425K, half Theodore's retirement, $190K, half savings, $42.05K, one vehicle, plus $50,000 compensation for financial abuse. Judge told Theodore, "You didn't manage finances, you controlled them as a tool of psychological abuse." Permanent spousal support, $2,500 month for life. Permanent restraining order, Theodore banned from contacting Ida forever. Theodore tried one more time outside court. "I'm sorry, I can change." Ida's response, "You had 40 years to treat me with respect. You chose control. Now it's over, I'm free." Geneva and Curtis confronted Theodore about his abuse. Both told him, "Until you acknowledge what you did and get help, we don't want relationship with you." Theodore devastated by children's rejection. 8 months later, Ida joined support group for domestic abuse survivors, met other women who survived similar control, realized, the problem was never me, it was always him. 1 year later, at 64, Ida celebrated birthday surrounded by family, friends, support group, celebrating her freedom. Geneva said, "Mom, I'm so proud of you." Ida has complete peace, living in her house, financially secure, $2,500 month support, legally protected, surrounded by love. Theodore lives in small apartment paying support, prohibited from coming near her. Ida proved, fear only has power if you let it. This story proves that psychological abuse is real domestic violence. Financial control is a weapon of abuse. You can leave at any age, even after 40 years. Courts recognize coercive control as abuse. Finding your voice can save your life. You're never too old to start over. Freedom is worth more than fear. Strength comes from standing up to bullies. If this story inspired you, please Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications for new content. Drop a comment. Was Ida right to leave after 40 years? Should she have left sooner? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, Trinidad, India, Philippines? Let me know. Remember, if a partner controls your finances, that's abuse. If someone isolates you from family friends, that's abuse. If someone threatens you or makes you afraid, that's abuse. Physical violence is not required for domestic abuse to be real. You have rights regardless of how long you've been married. It's never too late to leave. Courts recognize financial abuse, coercive control, and psychological abuse. You deserve freedom at any age. Ida's husband controlled her for 5 years. Finances, social contacts, everything. Threatened her with poverty and homelessness if she left. But one day she said, "I'm done being afraid." Next day she filed for divorce. Won her house, spousal support, half assets, $50 K compensation, permanent restraining order. 1 year later, at 64, she's completely free with total peace. She proved being terrified doesn't mean being powerless. Thank you for following this powerful journey from fear to courage, from control to freedom, from terror to complete peace and independence. Until the next story, stay strong, use your voice, and remember that you're never too old to reclaim your freedom from abuse.